Hi, my name is Yannick Ikichich, and I'm working on a development project to create a real-time pixel-based cognitive assistant. The idea behind it essentially is to create a spin on an intelligent tutoring system that is able to look at my screen, just directly at the pixels, see what I'm seeing, and then help me offload some of my cognitive load onto that assistant. So whether I'm playing a game or trading stocks or something, it should be able to look at my screen, see the pixels that I'm seeing, and based off of that, provide me with useful information. So I'm developing on Windows, mostly because 85% of computers have Windows installed as their OS, and it's my main OS as well. And I'm using Python to create my program. So I'm going to take you first through the proposal task list that I have so far. Very much on target so far. I started by setting up the developmental environment, the repository, doing some additional research, developing my initial screen grabbing, and then from there I also added application identification. So essentially, how does my overall cognitive assistant know what application is running? So know in what way to help. I'm able to do this through a number of ways. The main one I use is just by the window name. So here we have Task Manager open. That's the name of the window, and my cognitive assistant is able to essentially read that in and be like, "Oh, hey, that's an application I have domain knowledge about. I'm gonna provide help," and then provide assistance in some way. From there, I worked on pixel screen grabbing some more. Also in the third week, I optimized that by adding concurrency, multi-threading. I added keyboard and mouse interactions. Haven't used these yet, but essentially I can interact with any window in a very direct way. So my assistant not only is able to highlight and say, "Hey, this is what you should do," for simple things, can actually do them for me. And then finally, displaying info back on screen. More on this later. This is a tough one. It's not fully a solved problem, and I could use some help if anybody has any suggestions there. I'm using, I'm not sure if I mentioned, I'm using Python to develop this. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a example. So here we have the task manager. I'm going to launch my program and have it essentially capture this window and then display it again. Super exciting, but here we go. So the cool thing is, right now I'm running at about 125 FPS, so I'm capturing the image here at 125 FPS, so you can see it very smoothly resizes, no problems at all. It's very non-brittle in the sense that I can hide this, I can minimize this. It's actually going to keep working in the background, no problem at all. I can do all sorts of additional cool work. So if I move this to a second screen, this continues working. If I resize it entirely, make it full screen, it keeps working much slower. At full screen, 1440p, I get about 20 FPS. Still adequate, even to do additional computations. But yeah, so that's step one. You can see there's a tiny little bit of delay right here when I resize vertically. Nothing major though. Shouldn't mess anything up significantly. I'm gonna pause this. So one of the additional things I've added that I'm really struggling with also is putting text back onto the original screen. So it's pretty simple with OpenCV to run this and display text wherever I want on this image that I'm capturing, because essentially what's happening here is I'm capturing this image at 90 FPS frames per second, and then here in this screen I can do whatever I want to the pixels directly, so I could identify that these are the names, run some natural language processing to identify what processes I have open, and then highlight something that's maybe maybe it's malware. So I could just say, "Hey, this process right here is suspicious," and do this all in the background completely seamlessly. The issue, though, is that I actually would prefer for that to happen on this original one. I don't really want to display a secondary window. That secondary window is strictly for development purposes. If I actually remove that, the program still runs in the background. All the computations happen. I'm just not displaying those captured frames. That actually more than doubles my FPS, which is wonderful. But as I mentioned, the issue is actually developing that on screen on top of whatever application I'm running. So I did find some Py132 code that essentially is able to mimic this sort of capacity. So here I'm displaying it on top, essentially an overlay, displaying it over everything else that's happening on screen. Really cool. But there's issues such that here, if I have, it's like a black background, then you can see, maybe you can see that there's a bunch of sort of sloppy white text around this. Also, this is a very complicated method that I don't really love, and it feels more brittle than it should. Pi 132 approach is powerful, but I mean, just to get this code displayed, I had to write this much code. It's kind of unnecessary. So if anybody has any suggestions, so especially using Python on Windows, how to display info back on top of the original application that's running, on top of the original process, whether it's text or bounding boxes. So later on, let me go ahead and pause this, get that out of the way. Later on, I want to hook up a pre-trained deep neural network for object detection. So ideally, I could have instead of task manager here, I can have some sort of video running, and my application should be able to, for example, identify, run object detection on that video, and then identify, create, what are people or what are objects in real time, and display that info back on in terms of bounding boxes or text on top of the original image. So I'd like to be watching a video and then in real time highlight, this is a person, this is a dog, a tree, whatever. So that's challenging right now. So I'll be working on this for the next couple weeks, especially the neural net detection stuff. I've only budgeted 3 hours to continue working on the info displaying. That's going to take a lot more work, I see. I have obviously a couple methods, but they're not very complete, I think, and they're not optimal for this. And then finally, I want to start working on the sort of domain knowledge proof of concept approach using like Minesweeper or similar game, where essentially my program will be able to apply its existing domain knowledge to help me solve a problem that's happening in real time just based on the pixels, so seeing exactly what I'm seeing. So in the Minesweeper case, maybe it will warn me, hey, maybe you shouldn't click there, there's probably a mine there. Or even since it has mouse and keyboard inputs, I could just directly solve that problem for me. Obviously that ruins the entire point of the game, but this is just a trivial sort of proof of concept of the sort of thing, the sort of cognitive effort that it can automate. So if my job is full-time completing Minesweeper, I could use this to automate that entirely and then do something else with my time. That's sort of the motivation there. So that's what I'll be doing for the next 3 weeks. Pretty excited where I am right now. I just need to figure out how to better redisplay information that I want back on screen on top of the original application that I'm capturing. So tricky. If anybody has any information, please, or experience with this, please do send me links, relevant helpful stuff. That's pretty much it for this. Thank you guys.